North Carolina, sponsored by Senator Grafstein. We have Anya, is it Trivedi? Welcome, Anya. Thank you for being here. We hope you folks enjoy your week with us. And first up on the only bill on the calendar today, we have House Bill 347, Sports Wagering, Horse Racing Wagering. And Senator Moffitt is here with us to explain the bill. Senator Moffitt, you are recognized. Understand there is an amendment.
There is.
Senator Lazzara, you are recognized. Send forward your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have Amendment H347-AST-FR 67. I'd like to ask staff to please explain the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Lazzara. And Chair recognizes Nicholas Giddings with staff to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment is a combination of staff recognized technical fixes as well as requests from the Lottery Commission to help them better regulate sports betting and pari-mutuel wagering. Some of the pieces outside of that are found towards the end of the amendment, starting on page 7. The first part relates to the distribution of some of the tax revenue. In the bill itself, $1 million is going to the North Carolina Division of Parks and Recreation for grants to local governments to expend on youth sports. This is now going to go to the North Carolina Amateur Sports to be awarded for similar matters for youth sports equipment or for public facility upgrades. On the next page, you'll see a list of schools there. These are substantially similar to the prior list. However, when we made a change in Senate Commerce last week, we added in one area of the bill, Appalachian State, East Carolina University, and the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. However, that corresponding change was not made at another part in the bill. So that just clarifies that there. And lastly, at a request of the Lottery Commission, the amendment would also state that, well, the effective date of the bill is January 8th, 2024. Sports betting would not be authorized in the state until a date identified by the commission, which would be no later than 12 months after the act becomes law.
Thank you, Mr. Giddings. I just have a question. I was looking at the amendment, and I see where you have on page 8 of 9, you reference the North Carolina Outdoor Heritage Advisory Council in paragraph B. Is that corrected in a later part of the amendment?
Yeah, so currently the name of that organization is the North Carolina Outdoor Heritage Advisory Council. There is a bill to change the name of that, and if you see on the next page, it notes that at the end of page 8, it notes that if that bill or substantially similar legislation were to pass, then the name of that the council will change to the North Carolina Youth Outdoor Engagement Commission.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Members, any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Lee to accept the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the bill is now before us properly amended. Senator Moffitt, you're recognized to discuss the finance portions of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Before I get started, I'd like to point everybody to your summary. Your bill summary is going to have, in large measure, a lot of the information that I'm going to be covering with you. I believe it is on the committee website if you want to pull that up electronically, because it is quite thorough. I'd also like to thank my intern, Logan Stewart, for putting together an even better summary so I can present this finance package to you today. There are 4 licenses that we are dealing with in regards to authorizing sports wagering. The first one is the Interactive Sports Wagering License. There will be 12 of these licenses that will be permitted statewide. The fee for that license is $1 million. And the way that we have structured this is that upon application, the fee is paid. And if for some reason the applicant is denied their license, then the Lottery Commission would return 95% of those funds back to the applicant and retain 5% as part to offset their cost of determining whether or not they can be licensed in our state under these guidelines. And that is applicable to all 4 of these licenses. The second one is the service provider license. That's a $50,000 application fee and license. The third one is the sports wagering supplier license, which is a $30,000 application and license fee. And the last one, which is actually at the end of the bill, is the advanced deposit wagering license, and this has to do with parimutuel betting in particular, and that license is $20,000 as well. The second part from the finance perspective is what does the wagerer, or how can the person actually place their bets? The accounts that they set up interactively with these platforms, they can be funded with a cash at a place of public accommodation. They can use foreign currency and coin, personal checks and drafts, digital, crypto, and virtual currencies, online and mobile payment systems that support online money transfers, credit and debit cards, prepaid access cards and instruments, and any form of cash equivalent approved by the Commission. The tax and revenue part of the bill, we are charging an 18% tax on gross wagering revenue, and the distribution of the money goes as follows. We'll have $2 million annually to the Department of Health and Human Services for problem gambling. $1 million, as per the amendment, will go to the North Carolina Amateur Sports. $300,000 annually to each of the named colleges in the bill. $1 million annually to the North Carolina Outdoor Heritage Advisory Council, subject to the name change, which is being proposed right now. And any remaining amount of the proceeds, 20% annually, will go to the college institutions previously listed, 30% to North Carolina Major Events, Games, and Attractions Funds, and 50% goes to the general fund. Mr. Chair, that's pretty much the finance package. I'm prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Moffitt. Members, any questions of the finance portion of this bill for Senator Moffitt? Senator Robinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Moffitt, would you explain a little bit more about the advanced deposit wagering? Is that out of state, or how does that work? What is that? I didn't know anything about it till read this.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. Advanced deposit wagering is the way that parimutuel betting actually takes place. You're pooling your money. So everyone's putting their money forward into one pot of money, and depending on how the outcome of the race is how that money is distributed. That would be my basic understanding of the advanced deposit wagering.
Okay, just one follow-up. So that's a license that can be given to any entity? Or how is, I understand the other licenses, but how is that license awarded?
So it's going to be primarily for track operators that are engaged in horse racing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members? Senator Alexander, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. We did receive the fiscal analysis, but I'm just curious as to the amount, the 50% to the general fund. What is the estimated actual net to the general fund that you've calculated for this?
Could we ask staff, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator Moffitt, we can. You going to take that? Chair recognizes Ms. Emma Turner.
Emma Turner, Fiscal Research. So the net general fund impact can be found on the table on the front. At the bottom, you'll see the general fund impact of $9.1 million in the first year, increasing to $43.4 million in the last year. This is net of expenditures related to administrative costs and all of the earmarks of the tax revenue within the bill.
Okay, perfect. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Could you tell us the overall economic impact before those deductions? You're recognized.
So the net state impact after expenditures is shown on the table at the front. It's $10.1 million in the first year, $71.1 in the fifth year. The total impact, I don't know that we have right in front of us, but If you look to page 4 of the bill, of the fiscal note, it shows the tax revenue, which is the main source of revenue from this bill, and it increases from 11.8 million in the first year to 100.6 million.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? Okay, we will now recognize members of the audience to speak. First on the list, we have Reverend Mark Creech. Reverend Creech, you're recognized for 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Reverend Mark Creech, Executive Director of the Christian Action League. Most of us have witnessed how Amazon and other online shopping sites have hurt small businesses. Small businesses must compete with these larger online companies with more resources, better technology, and larger customer bases. And this makes it impossible for small businesses to keep up, leading to fewer sales and revenue. Similarly, sports gaming competes with retail by diverting consumers' discretionary income. Instead of spending on retail goods and essential services, individuals place sports bets. And this can result in reduced revenue, job cuts, and closures for small businesses, which can either stall or lower the state's economic growth rate. Sports gaming has vast marketing and advertising resources for media platforms, television, radio, print media, websites, and mobile apps. Their advertisements are commonly displayed at sporting events, billboards, or outdoor spaces. It's everywhere, and most retail or small businesses can't compete. The flashy allurement of sports gaming advertising and the normalization of gambling by state sanction can lead to skewed priorities where too many prioritize gambling over essential expenses. Granted, the state will be taxing this activity, but there's no promise the revenue will be enough to offset the negative impact on the tax base. This doesn't even consider that when people gamble, vast numbers end up deeply in debt due to addiction, leading to increased crime costs, high debt rates, and taxes. You have heard it said that the house always wins when it comes to gambling. Well, that applies to the state as well as the individual. You may want to ponder that for a while. The Christian Action League urges you to vote against this misguided policy.
Thank you, Reverend Creech. Next up, we have Mr. John Rustin, North Carolina Family Policy Council. Mr. Rustin, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm John Rustin, President of the North Carolina Family Policy Council. Theft, crime, embezzlement, job loss, personal bankruptcy, substance abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, divorce, suicide. This is the human cost of legalized gambling and gambling addiction. If passed, House Bill 347 would impose a massive expansion of legalized gambling on North Carolina, as it would legalize state-sanctioned sports gambling on every computer, tablet, and mobile phone and smart TV in the state. It would also flood our state, and especially our children and young adults, with ceaseless advertisements and promotions for gambling on amateur, electronic, collegiate, and professional sporting events, including, and in addition, parimutuel wagering on horse racing. Decades of research clearly demonstrates that the more prevalent gambling is, and the more forms of gambling that are legalized and advertised, the more citizens will gamble. Of those who do, a significant portion will develop a problem or pathological gambling issue. Conservative estimates suggest that North Carolina can expect to see tens of thousands of additional citizens and their families victimized by gambling addiction if this bill is enacted into law. This would result in an enormous financial and human toll on our state. For these reasons, we urge you and implore you to oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rustin. And our final speaker is Mr. Dennis Justice, private citizen. Mr. Justice, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dennis Justice from Fletcher. Mr. Creech talked about Amazon. I played hooky working from Amazon today to be here. I hope the lottery board doesn't start on January the 8th. For starters, I don't gamble on January the 8th. That's Elvis's birthday. I think that's rushing it. And I think despite all this process, I still think you're rushing this. In the third decade of the 21st century, we still have an alcohol board regulating raffles, bingo, and casino night fundraisers. Now, I know Bill S-668 was proposed for a gaming commission, which I think what we need to be doing first. I think we need to put all our regulations that is not the lottery under that. I don't agree with the makeup of it. I think it should be 3 from the governor, including the chair and the vice chair, and 2 from the House and 2 from the Senate, serving at discretion. I'm not trying to stop sports betting, okay? I think it's foolish to just have 12 sports books. I think it's foolish to have 10 to 12 sports books. What happens if there are not 10? Who goes to jail? What's the consequence? You know, my buddy Mark Thomas at Zen Sports just became the 13th licensee in Tennessee, a state with 2/3 our population. New Jersey has over 30 sports books. They're the one that started all this. I think you're also not considering the Bureau of Indian Affairs proposal and how they would change the criteria for land trusts and how they might greatly liberate federal tribes if we offer any Class 3 gaming. There's going to be some expansion of gaming, and I was here last week talking about all these convenience stores that sell lottery tickets that have gray machines. They shouldn't be allowed to have lottery tickets and alcohol or even tobacco. I think we should be fixing that first. There's a lot of other things, as you're fully aware of, Mr. Chairman, that I don't agree with, but I'm not trying to stop this bill. I'm trying to improve it. I think you need a gaming commission, and I think next year all these gaming interests should come back with a modified compromise and treat this logically. Regulate gambling like a business and it will pay like a business, but regulate gambling like a hobby and it will cost like a hobby. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Members, any additional questions regarding the finance portion of this bill? Senator Bergen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I wasn't here when it started. A couple of questions on I guess it's the finance part, because the bet is the finance part, I think. But you correct me if I get off of bounds here. But in reading the bill, and I read the concern about who can bet, and I'm really concerned about amateur sports too. Can family members of the people that are playing the sport bet on it? May I clarify?
Sure.
What I'm concerned about is you've got this young high or college quarterback, and can his dad bet on him? Can his brother or sister bet on him?
Thanks, Senator Bergen. We will have staff clarify the prohibition section of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nick Giddings, Legislative Analysis. So there are prohibitions on participants in the event betting on the event that they are participating in. However, there's nothing explicit about relatives of participants in the event necessarily being prohibited from betting on a relative who's participating.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Giddings. Senator Bergen, you're recognized for additional question.
Also, Senator, what about micro betting? And I'll define the term. Micro betting is betting on individual plays or individual occurrences, like is the next play going to be a run or a pass? Is what's going to be the result at the end of the first quarter? Any of those, is that addressed in this bill?
It's permitted.
It is permitted. Follow up.
Senator Bergen, you're recognized for additional follow-up.
And lastly, in looking over the fiscal note on it and comparing it to the 2000 or the April 28th, March 28th bill, it looks like that in the fifth year it'll generate $100.6 million on $7.2 billion bet. Now, if my math is right, that's a 1.4% return. Now, I'm dabble in business a little bit, and I don't usually make an investment in a business that only generates 1.4% return on the investment, and I'm just curious if staff would say if my math is right or wrong on
that. Staff, anyone want to take a stab at explaining the handle? You're recognized.
Emma Turner, Fiscal Research. So your math is correct that the tax revenue expected is about 1.5% of the total wagers. However, the tax is imposed on wagers minus payouts. So the assumed hold in this analysis is about 8.2%. So the operators are assumed to hold back about that percentage of total wagers, and the tax is imposed on that.
Last follow-up.
You're recognized for a final follow-up, Senator Bergen.
And I don't know if this is for staff but so what is, if you look at the total amount of the bet, the $7.2 billion on the bet, what is the revenue calculated on what is the revenue to the folks that are actually running this program? What is their revenue? I know if the revenue to the state is 100.6, after all of their ins and outs, what is the revenue to them?
I think it should be about 4 times what it is to the state, but at 18% of the gross gaming revenue. But I'll recognize staff if they've got a better answer than that.
So in the 5th year, we have assumed revenue, gross gaming revenue of about $585 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any additional questions on the finance portion of the bill? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Lazzara, moves for favorable to the bill as amended with unengrossed amendments with a referral to rules. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Bill passes. And this meeting is adjourned.